Hello, I'm Russell, and welcome to episode 18 of the Leith Lives podcast series. Today we hear from Margaret Gray. Born in Easter Road in 1929, Margaret came to visit us at our wee Museum of Memory to show 3 photographs of her childhood days. Margaret recalls her school days at Leith Academy Primary School, playing peevers with pals in the street, and taking part in one of the Leith Gala parades. As a young girl, she remained in Leith at the outbreak of the Second World War, despite an abortive evacuation to West Lothian. At 96 years old, Margaret's memories are vivid, humorous, and poignant in equal measure. Let's hear from her now.
I'm Margaret Gray, and I was born in Easter Road in 365, and we were on the first floor.
And what year was that, Margaret?
That was in 1929.
So I know ladies don't often reveal their ages, but could you reveal yours to us?
I'm 96, and now even a half added on. Well, I've brought in 3 photographs of the Leith Academy primary classes that I was in. I started school when I was 4 years and 9 months, because at that time there were 2 entrances per year. So I was in the September one, where others had gone in April.
So did that make you quite young?
Yes, I was the youngest in the class. It was fine because I was quite a confident wee girl.
Were the classes quite big back then?
Yes, there were 44 in the class. Just one teacher, Miss Mann, and she was a lovely teacher. She went on, and at the end of the second year, you should have got a change of teacher. But at the end of term, she was clearing up and stood up on the teacher's high chair to clear the shelf and fell and fractured her skull. So when we went back in the September, she was back at work, but she didn't want to start with a new class of 5-year-olds. So she continued to teach us for another year. But she was a lovely, gentle lady, and she lived with her parents in number 1 Clarebank Crescent. And then on the qualifying year, you got a male teacher. But by the time I was at the qualifying year, before the qualifying, there were no male teachers because of the war. There was only the headmaster. Then we went into the complete opposite and had a Miss Edmund that belted us. And then there were 2 other female teachers that were sisters, Miss Larks, the 2 Miss Larks. And the younger one, she too used her strap freely. But the other one was, the older one was the gentle one.
Miss Edmund sounds like a dragon.
She was. But when you grew up and thought back, she lost her boyfriend in the war, and she was living with her old mother. Now, she would only be in her early 40s, if that. But to us, she was old. And then her old mother would probably only be in her 60s.
It's true, there was a generation of unmarried women, or spinsters as they would have called it back then, wouldn't they?
Yes, and I've joined them because I've never married. But I didn't want to be married.
You knew your own mind.
I definitely did.
Margaret, let's have a look at this picture here. I just wonder if you could describe what we're looking at.
Well, this was the school photograph, I think just probably the second year that you were at school. It was 19 the crest is there, and the date's 1934-35 year. But I would say that we were mostly, the older ones would be 6 and the younger ones would be 5.
And we've got a mixed class of boys and girls here.
Yes, we were more or less equal numbers, and the girls had the navy black.
Like a tunic?
Yes, it was a tunic, yeah. But so we were split up, and the boys were in the front row, and there's a row of boys at the back, and an odd one. No, by the looks of this photograph, there were more girls than boys. I thought were quite equal, but no.
I recognise the corner of that building there. Can you tell us where the school actually was?
Well, that's the primary school, and it's now knocked down, I believe, but it was opposite the giant Leith links, and we would play on what we called was the giant brae, which we thought was a big hill. But it was lovely for sledging down in the winter time. You had to go home for your lunch and come back. When I was 7, we moved to Clarebank Crescent. So it was quite a walk from Clarebank Crescent through the links and to the primary. But again, compared to nowadays, your mother took you for the first week to the school, and then after that you just went with the other kids. And you run home at lunchtime and had a quick bite, and you ran back, and then you finished then had to walk back. So you weren't playing at school. When you got home, you had Diablos and you had the Peaveries, and there was a gentleman in Easter Road had the gravestones at the corner of St. Clair Street, and he, I don't know, he was a very patient man, because we were always getting the parts of the granite from the gravestones to pay peavery beds with, and we were much superior to the other children who had empty tins of shoe polish to play as a peavery.
So you had a quality
stone that you could really manoeuvre it. Yes.
It would skite along the ground.
Yes.
Fantastic.
But now the tins were a bit out of control. You had more control over the stone than the tin.
Is there anybody in that picture who was a particularly good friend that you remember?
Wilma Watson. And there's Bertie MacLeod. Bertie MacLeod went on to Leith Academy Secondary, but Wilma went on to Trinity after the qualifying, and I went up to Gillespie's. They eventually married, and they've now got... I babysat for them up in Dundee.
Margaret, we're looking at a second photograph here.
Yes, I think we would be about 9 in this photograph. No, it's 1938, so we must have been 10.
And is it the same class of children?
Yes, we're all there, and even have the same boys in the front row. That's Charlie Miller. I felt to this day sorry for that boy, because he was wearing specs and he always seemed to have a cold, and he stayed on at school. He didn't go to the secondary school because he didn't pass the qualifying. Now, you didn't know what his home background was like, but you just felt sorry for him.
And at this point, in the 1938 photograph, had you changed friendships? Had you become closer to somebody else in the class, or were you still quite friendly with Wilma?
Yes, I kept friends with Wilma until she died at 88. And I followed her all over the country because after she married Bert, he was with the electricity showrooms and he was the manager. And they moved down to Stoke-on-Trent, then they moved to Cheshire, and then they came up to Dundee. And when I was 35, I moved up to, work took me to Dundee. And I went into the electricity shop there, and here was Bert. So I babysat for them, and the friendship continued until both of them have died. And I'm still friendly with the children.
There seems to be more children in this image, actually, than in the one that you showed us before. Unless they're just bigger, but to me it seems like there's more.
Maybe when we were 5, they were off with mumps and measles and whooping cough. We had the whole lot, and once one took it, everybody took it. So probably there wasn't a full attendance there, whereas being 10-year-olds, we were healthier.
This picture, photograph, 1938, quite a pertinent date, because a year later, the Second World War breaks out.
That's right.
And you were living in Leith at that time.
Yes, and when the war broke out, the whole of Leith Academy was evacuated to Galashiels as a school, teachers and everything. And whereas we had a weekend house up in the Pentlands at Maleny Range, and my mother and my sister and I were going to evacuate ourselves to that. But we stuck it for about 5 weeks. But we had no heating. We had a paraffin lamp for lighting and a Primus stove to cook on, and it was 2 miles, a wee bit more than 2 miles to Curry Primary School. So we would be stuck there in the winter. And then the government was going to requisition our house at Clearbank Crescent and put 3 nurses from the Eastern General Hospital in the house with my father. So Mother wasn't having that, and we weren't going to be snowbound. So we went back to the house, and then our name was put down at the education offices to be evacuated with the people that had been, for various reasons, left behind. And then we were sent to Polkemmet House out at Whitburn with 100 children, approximately, under 12 years old.
I can't imagine what that is like, to be told or forced or asked to leave your home and go somewhere else into a strange place. And I know your generation, they did it. They had to be evacuated all over the country. How did you kind of manage it?
Well, we went armed with our gas mask tied over our shoulder, the gas mask box around our necks with our names on it. And I can remember my mother gave us a gingerbread cake that I had made myself to take with us in case we were hungry before we arrived. But it was not a good time. And I had to look after my sister, who was 5, and another little girl who was also 5. Well, I had never even probably washed my neck properly before I went, and have to be responsible for these 2 young children.
So children aged 10, 11, 12 are forced to grow up very quickly because they have to take on these additional responsibilities.
No wonder to this day I still hate housework. That was why I was never going to get married, because they made the 10-year-olds and 11-year-olds, we had to polish the teachers' bedrooms on our knees, and in the big sinks we had to wash the blankets that we could hardly lift.
Leith obviously was a target during World War II because it was a port. I wonder if you recollect returning to Leith or being around Leith later in the war years, and anything that you recall from that time?
Yes, well, I threatened that my sister and I were going to run away from Beaumont House, and we saved the wee silver threepennies, the wee silver ones, and you had to hide them in the runners of the drawers, because they would go into your one drawer that you had to keep your clothes in and inspect it. So I had to be careful that we saved up the 3 threepenny bits, and I discovered how, I don't know, but it was 9pence to get the bus back from Whitburn home to Edinburgh. So I had it all worked out, the tuck box. I made my sister and myself make a big show of we were buying the sweets, but we were keeping back 1 threepenny piece that we hid. So it was all planned out, and I would have done it, but I wrote to my mother to tell her, there were no phones, of course, in these days, and I wrote to my mother that when she heard that we had run away, she was not to worry about us, because I wasn't like the other children that had run away and had hitched a lift back to Edinburgh. We were coming back by bus. So don't worry, Mum. So needless to say, she knew I was meaning it and came out with the next bus and took us back home. And then I was out playing in the street one night, and it was a grey day with low clouds, but occasionally a break in it. We heard this plane that we knew was a German-sounding plane. It was different from the
British Air Force.
British. It had a drone on it. And we were at the top of the crescent, looking down over Leith Links and over the wireworks that were in Leith, and saw this stick about the size of a pencil, a short pencil, dropping, and we thought, oh, a parachutist. But no, it landed, and there was a big cloud of smoke went up. Well, it actually was the bomb that landed at the entrance to coming in here. And we ran to the house and we said, it's a Jerry. And my father went out to the back door, and he said, the kids are right. The plane had circled round, low down. It just seemed not very far above the roofs, and you saw the swastika sign and everything. So that was it, aiming either for the Forth Bridge, but we think it was jettisoning its bombs from that had been dropped in Clydebank. But it was 6 o'clock in the evening.
It was quite common for them to, I think, as you say, jettison any bombs they hadn't using to bomb Glasgow.
Make it lighter to get their own plane had probably been damaged, so they would jettison the bombs to get back home.
Presumably that was quite frightening, even though it might have been a spectacle to see.
No, it was more an excitement. Oh, look, it's a Jerry plane. I must tell Mummy about it. So we ran home. It's a Jerry.
Oh, my goodness. I mean, those of us that never lived through the war era can imagine being face to face with that. Do you recall what happened in the hours and days after that and the effect that it had on the community or locally?
Yes, because we still had a few other bombs that landed in this area, and then there was once a bungalow in Milton Road that got a incendiary bomb dropped on its roof. So, but mostly it was landmines that were being dropped in this area.
Margaret, you've got a third photograph to show us here. This is not a school class photograph. It's slightly different. What are we looking at here?
This is us being rosebuds and boys as the escorts, and we were on a lorry. But this photograph was taken just like the school photographs in the playground. But we were all dressed up.
What was the reason you were dressed up?
Because we're going on the Port of Leith parade and on this lorry. And the girl in the centre was a girl Lumsden. She was the queen, as it were. And the two sitting in the front were her escorts.
So this must be for Leith's gala. Is it the pageant?
Yes.
The pageant.
This was the pageant day. And, but you talk about health and safety. We were on open lorries and you weren't even told to be careful. You were expected to behave.
So it was a float, like a big float, a motorised float. Yeah.
That's the word.
Can you tell me a little bit about what the boys are wearing?
Well, the boys seem to just be in their shorts, of course, in these days, and they all had the same shirt on, and they had a fancy tie.
What did you have to wear as a girl?
Well, we were in rose-coloured, pale rose-coloured dresses, and we had the rose headbands round us. There's quite a few glum faces. We were told to smile, but don't think we're all that keen to smile.
What was it like being in the pageant?
You were just told to do it, and your mother made your dresses for you. You didn't go and buy them. They were either they got somebody, a seamstress, to make them, or your mother made them, but you were given the pattern so that they were all the same.
And was it quite an exciting experience? I suppose it's very different from your everyday.
We didn't seem to have a lot of fun. It was a case of, you behave yourself, don't let me down. So it was more you were drilled to look good and smile.
You're on show.
You're on show.
And all the good citizens of Leith are going to be
watching it. So yes, that was it precisely.
It looks like you're being photographed in the school grounds again.
Grounds before we set off. That's right. And at this stage, when we're 9, because it was before the war, I think we would be 9 at the time, we were beginning to shoot up in different sizes. and there would be some that had a skirt on and was heading, much taller than the small one that hadn't moved.
Well, it'd be a shame if you had a growth spurt and your costume had already been made for you.
Well, that was a girl, Audrey, and she was the small one, although she was older than I was. And this was a Joan, and she was the tallest in the class.
There's one boy who's really on the back row performing for this photograph, isn't he?
That was the same Charlie Miller that had been in the other photograph. So for once he was looking happy, but he had a miserable time. And that lad there, his father had been killed, and he got George Heriot Foundation bursary to take him to George Heriot's school.
So how does it feel looking back at this photograph now?
Yes, it's interesting to look back and wonder where they all are. I don't know any that are still alive, but...
Was it only 1 year that you had to do this, or was it every year?
No, this seemed to be the only year because, yes, it's the first year that we took part. Our class, I think it was, I can't remember, because the war interrupted. Yeah. So whether if there had been no war, you would have done it when you were 11-year-old, but this was when we were 9. So this was a class. I don't remember what the other ones were doing, other classes.
The war years must have changed everything, knocked everything on its head, and routines completely overturned.
Well, the whole school was evacuated to Galashiels, but nobody else went to Galashiels. The people that wanted children, they came down to the station and picked them, just chose them at random. You weren't allocated or anything taken into consideration. The people that were willing to take a child in came down to the station, looked at them all and take this one or I'll take these two and so on.
Our heartfelt thanks to Margaret for recalling her formative years spent in Leith. If you've enjoyed listening to this podcast, why not tune into our other episodes of Leith Lives? Find us on YouTube, Apple Podcasts and Spotify. Maybe you have your own stories to tell. Contact us at comhist@googlemail.com or pop into our wee Museum of Memory at Ocean Terminal in Leith. Until next time, cheerio.